On
Welcome
Riddle Street,
to
even the
Noir
seasons know
Classic.
how to lie. So when tulips show up in November, I know this case is already going in the wrong direction. Chapter 2.
Chapter 1. The bread box keeps its appointment when a man comes to Nero Wolfe with a ghost in a kitchen. He is usually either a fool, a drunk, or a person who has let solitude turn his nerves into a string section. Since I met Mr. Edwin Marr at 11:15 on a Tuesday morning, sober, properly brushed, and carrying his hat as if he had been trained by a Swiss governess, I crossed off the first two and reserved judgment on the third. He was shown in by Fritz, who gave me one look on his way out. That look, said he disapproved of clients, who arrived between Wolfe's second breakfast coffee and noon, a period Fritz regarded as sacred. I shared the feeling, but I was not the one who had to balance the books. Marr was 60. If he was a day, narrow in the shoulders, careful in every motion, with grey hair laid so neatly across his head, it looked negotiated into place. His black gloves were folded in his lap. He sat on the red leather chair as if he expected it to object. Wolfe had not yet entered. I took the chair behind my desk and gave Marr the kind of smile that invites confidence without promising miracles. "Mr. Wolfe will be down when he is ready," I told him. "You may begin with me. It saves time, and Mr. Wolfe has an unreasonable attachment to saving time." He nodded. I was told that. By a friend or an enemy, a banker. That could go either way. He blinked once. The joke had arrived, but he had no use for it. "My name is Edwin Marr. I live on East 63rd Street alone. My wife died 8 years ago, merely because the sentence had ended, and he did not want to touch the next one until he had to." I said, "Yes." He looked at me with pale eyes that had spent years examining receipts, weather reports, and moral hazards, each morning for the past 6 days. "I have gone to my kitchen at 7. I lift the lid of the bread box. Inside, it is a brass locket." I leaned back. "The same locket?" "Yes." "Are you sure?" "And because 8 years ago, on the day after her funeral, I threw it into the East River." At that point, the office door opened and Nero Wolfe entered, bearing his bulk with the air of an emperor who had reluctantly agreed to inspect a provincial tax matter. He crossed to his desk and sat. His eyes, half closed, went to Marr, then to me. No more than 30 words, Archie. "He finds a dead wife's locket in his bread box every morning. He threw it into the river 8 years ago." Wolfe's eyes opened. "Pufui. Bread should not be mixed with melodrama." He looked at Marr. "Has your house been entered?" "I do not know." "Then you know nothing of consequence yet." Wolfe turned to me. "Why is he here before lunch?" "Because ghosts rise early." Wolfe ignored that. "Mr. Marr, if you expect me to discuss spirits, phantoms, or communication from the grave, you may leave." "I expect nothing of the kind," Marr said. "I expect or hope that someone is trying to frighten me." "That is more rational," Wolfe admitted. "Why?" Marr drew a breath. "Because my wife, Laura, was killed." Wolfe's fingers, which had been resting on the arms of the chair, moved an inch. "Killed, not dead. The coroner said she fell down the cellar stairs and broke her neck. The police found no reason to dispute it then, but the truth was uglier. I did dispute it in my own mind, and now I know Clara did too." His voice stayed level, which made it worse. She had not been clumsy. She had been angry with someone. She had said 3 days before that if anything happened to her, I was not to believe it was an accident. I said, "Did you tell the police that?" "Number, why not?" He looked at me as if I had asked why he had not climbed the Woolworth building in his socks. "Because I was a coward, Mr. Goodwin. Also because I did not know whom she meant." Wolfe shut his eyes again. "That meant his mind had started moving. Who had access to your house?" "Nobody officially. My maid comes by day. She does not have a key. I let her in. My nephew has a key for emergencies. So does my attorney. I had forgotten that until yesterday. There was once another key, for my wife's cousin, but she died years ago. My nephew is Leonard Vale. My attorney is Howard Cullum. The maid is Mrs. Janet Bressler, and the dead cousin. Eunice Dora, long dead and irrelevant except for the old key, Wolfe grunted. Who knew of the locket? No one, I thought. It was a cheap brass thing with a photograph inside. Mine on one side, hers on the other. She wore it often the first year of our marriage, then almost never, after she died. I found it among her things. I do not know why, but I grew to hate it. I threw it away, I said. You threw it into the river personally. From where? 50, 9th Street Bridge. Any witnesses? Numbered. Did you open it before you threw it? He hesitated. Yes. And the photographs were gone. That got my full attention. I glanced at Wolfe. He had opened one eye. Gone, I said. Yes, the locket was empty. And that didn't strike you as worth remembering until now. It struck me very forcibly. I remembered it then. I remember it now. I merely did not connect it with anything. Did your wife remove the photographs? I assume so. I never asked. She was dead. The front doorbell rang. Fritz would answer it. Wolfe looked toward the hall with the expression of a man whose digestion had been insulted by architecture. He addressed Ma. You have not yet said why this absurdity compels my involvement now, after 6 mornings and 8 years. Ma's careful hands tightened on the gloves. Because this morning there was something else in the bread box. I said. What? A note. Wolfe's eyes opened all the way. You omitted that. I was coming to it. Then come faster. Ma reached into an inner pocket and produced an envelope. It was plain white, cheap and sealed. He handed it to me because I was nearer. I opened it and slid out a folded sheet. One line had been typed in capitals. You threw away the wrong thing. I read it aloud. For a second. The room went still. The traffic sounds from West 35th Street drifted in through the windows. A horn, a truck grinding a gear, a voice that had found disappointment at retail. Wolfe held out his hand. I gave him the note and envelope. He inspected them with distaste, as if they had arrived wrapped around spoiled fish. Ordinary bond, ordinary machine. No signature, Archie. Yes, do not grin. It is vulgar. I'm not grinning. I'm admiring the phrasing. It has a nice domestic menace. Confine yourself to utility, Mr. Ma. Did you touch the note? Yes. Who else has seen it? My maid. She found me standing in the kitchen with it in my hand. Did she read it? Number I sent her out. I got up. Then, if you'll excuse me, I'll get Sol Panzer on the phone and have him start at the practical end. House keys maid, nephew, attorney, and any brass locket merchants operating from river bottoms to your bread shelf. No, Wolfe said. I turned. No, you will first ask Mr. Ma 2 questions I should not have to ask. I sat fine. Mr. Ma, are you rich, and did your wife have admirers? A faint color showed at his cheekbones. Yes, moderately rich, and yes. There, I said. 1 practical question and 1 eternal. Wolfe ignored me. Names of the admirers. Ma's mouth thinned. I know of only one who mattered. Victor Talbot. He was associated with an antiques gallery on Madison Avenue. My wife knew him before our marriage. Did the association continue after your marriage? I believed not. That is not what I asked. No, Ma said. I discovered, 2 weeks before her death, that they had met again. Did you confront her? Yes. She said Mr. Talbot possessed something that belonged to her, and she intended to get it back. Wolfe was silent. I said, Did she say what? Number did you ask? Yes, and she refused. The door opened, and Fritz entered, wearing the expression of a man who had been made party to civic decline. Mr. Wolfe, Inspector Kramer. That was enough to make me sit straighter. If Kramer was arriving before noon without warning, either homicide had broken out nearby, or he had news he enjoyed less than indigestion. Send him in, Wolfe said. Kramer came in hard and square, with his hat shoved back and his eyes on me first. Then Wolfe, then Ma. He stopped. Well, he said, that saves time. Wolfe sighed. You are fond of theft. Kramer, whose time have you saved? Mine may be yours. He jabbed a finger at Ma. You don't leave town. Ma stared. What on earth? Kramer turned to Wolfe. I suppose he's your client already. He has spoken in this room. That is often sufficient. What has he done? Maybe murder. Maybe not. Kramer looked at Ma again. Howard Cullum was found dead an hour ago in his office, hit once on the head with a bronze paperweight. His clerk says Ma had an appointment with him at 10:30. Ma had gone white. But his voice held. I did. I never arrived. Why not? Because I came here. Kramer's eyes narrowed. That had better be true. It is true, I said. He was in this room before 11:30 and with me before Wolfe came down. Kramer grunted. Fine. Then he may have had somebody do it for him. Wolfe, who detested noise before lunch and police enthusiasm at any hour, looked from Kramer to the note in his hand, and then to Ma. Mr. Ma, he said softly. You neglected to mention that your attorney possessed a key to your house. Inspector Kramer, you neglected to arrive 5 minutes later, which would have been more convenient. Archie, this has ceased to be a domestic nuisance. Get Saul Panzer. I rose. Wolfe settled deeper into his chair, his lips pushing forward, his eyes fixed on the note. Also, he said, tell him to find Mr. Victor Talbot before the police do.
On Riddle Street, even the seasons know how to lie. So when tulips show up in November, I know this case is already going in the wrong direction. Chapter 2. Flowers are supposed to leave perfume, not questions. But the bouquet came with no fingerprints, no sender, and no innocent explanation.
Chapter 2. A locket with a young clasp and an old face. It is one of the disadvantages of working for Nero Wolfe that an object can sit on his desk and acquire consequence merely because he has chosen to look at it. A brass locket on my own desk would have been a trinket, a memory, or a nuisance. On Wolfe's desk, between the blotter and the bronze paperweight Fritz, said should never have been there because it scratched the polish. It became an argument. Kramer had gone, taking Ma with him for a formal conversation downtown, and leaving behind a quantity of irritation. Wolfe detested police interruptions, and he detested even more having a client borrowed before Wolfe had decided whether to keep him. He had retreated to the plant rooms for his noon session among the orchids, and when he came down at 2 o'clock for lunch, he had said only that murder was the most expensive form of impatience. After lunch, with coffee served and Wolfe installed in the chair that took him as seriously as he took himself, I put the locket under a better light. It lay open in my palm, no larger than a silver dollar, brass darkened by years, except where a line at the clasp caught the lamp and answered it with a young, hard gleam. The shell was worn, even abraded at the edges, as though it had indeed ridden in a pocket or purse for a long time before anyone decided it belonged in a bread box. The hinge was older, showing the same tired grain as the back. But the clasp was new, not merely newer, fresh. I got up, crossed to Wolfe's desk, and handed it over. He took it with thumb and forefinger, peering down with the expression he used for inferior manuscripts and excellent mushrooms. Well, the brass shell is old, I said. The clasp is not. See the seam there, bright with filing marks, and the little catch is sharper than the wear on the case. Somebody repaired it recently. Obviously. Thank you. I mention it only because some detectives enjoy hearing the evidence before the conclusion. He ignored that. The object did not come from the river, or if it once did, it has since visited a craftsman. Miracles are incompetent with hinges, meaning somebody had it in hand recently. Objects do not travel by conscience, Wolfe said. They travel by hands, and hands are attached to purpose. I sat, so one purpose is to put the thing in Ma's bread box and keep his nerves lively. Another is to type him a note saying he threw away the wrong thing. That suggests a performance. It also suggests somebody wanted him thinking backward, to his wife, and sideways, to some object other than the locket. Yes, Cullum is dead. Yes, so if Cullum had a key to the house, And if he knew something about the wife, and if somebody killed him this morning, we may have more than one purpose moving around on the same pair of feet. Wolfe closed the locket and set it down with distaste. Not the same pair, possibly the same mind. He glanced at the clock. Saul should report. Right on cue. The office door opened, and Saul Panzer came in, calm and dry and faintly apologetic, as if competence were a private vice he preferred not to discuss. Behind him came Fred Durkin, whose face always made me think of a good-humored grocer, until I remembered he could trail a man through Midtown for 6 hours without once appearing to notice him. Wolfe looked from one to the other. Well, Saul handed me a sheet of notes and addressed Wolfe. Victor Talbot is alive, at liberty, and not especially bright. He left his apartment on 72nd Street at 11:40, went to an antiques restoration shop on Lexington, owned by one Emil Crane, stayed 20 minutes, then to a restaurant, then to his gallery. Fred is on him now by arrangement, Wolfe grunted. Crane restores jewelry. Among other things, Saul said. Miniatures, lockets, watch cases, small metal fittings. He has a good reputation and poor manners. I looked at the locket on the desk. Did Talbot bring him a brass locket with a shiny new clasp? Saul shook his head. Not today. I asked a man nearby who knows the shop. Crane did some small repair work last week for Talbot, but he didn't know what. That is as close as I could get without ringing bells. Wolfe's eyes narrowed. Good. And Howard Cullum. Saul consulted memory, which in his case was better than most filing systems. Widower, 54, respectable practice, not rich, no scandals on the surface. He handled Ma's investments, deed matters, and apparently his late wife's estate. He had one clerk, a Miss Avery. She told the police Cullum was nervous this morning and asked twice whether Mr. Marr had called. At 10:15, a man came to see him without an appointment. Miss Avery says the man gave the name Talbot. I whistled. Convenient. Yes, Saul said, possibly too convenient. Miss Avery saw him only briefly. Medium height, dark hat, light overcoat. If half the men in New York vanished under that description, the sidewalks would grow weeds. Wolfe folded his hands on his middle. Did Cullum admit him? Yes. Miss Avery heard them talking in the inner office, not shouting. At 10:30, she went downstairs to mail a letter. When she returned at 10:40, the outer office was empty and the inner office door ajar. Cullum was on the floor. I said, and Marr was expected at 10:30, a neat arrangement. If he had gone, he could have found the body. Or been found with it, Wolfe said. The phone rang. I picked it up. It was Fred. Talbot had received a caller at the gallery, a woman in a dark green suit, around 3 o'clock. She had stayed 10 minutes and come out looking angry enough to start a movement. Fred had followed her to a building off Madison, where the directory listed Helena Voss. Interior decoration. I relayed it. Wolfe made a small noise. Archie, find whether Helena Voss was known to Laura Marr. Also whether she is known to Talbot in any fashion less innocent than wallpaper. I got Helena Voss on the phone in 12 minutes by telling her maid I represented a magazine. She came on crisp and guarded. Miss Voss, I said, I am trying to identify friends of the late Mrs. Laura Marr for a private matter. Were you acquainted? A pause. Who is asking? Archie Goodwin. Another pause shorter. For Nero Wolfe. That interested me. Yes. Then tell Mr. Wolfe, I was Mrs. Marr's friend, and if he wants more, he may ask me himself, not by telephone. She hung up. I reported that. Wolfe snorted. She has intelligence enough to ration it. Good. Get Mr. Marr. Marr was not available. Kramer had released him only an hour earlier, and he had gone home. I called there, and after a delay got him. His voice sounded as if he had aged between breakfast and dinner. Yes, Mr. Goodwin, 2 questions first. Did you know Helena Voss? A silence. Yes. She was my wife's friend. Close. Moderately. Did your wife ever mention Victor Talbot and Helena Voss in the same sentence? Numbers. Second question. Did your attorney ever discuss with you the contents of your wife's estate? Of course. There was very little. Some jewelry, clothing, personal effects. Any missing item. Another silence longer. One necklace was not found, and for years I believed that was what mattered most. What necklace? A diamond pendant on a narrow gold chain. It had belonged to her mother, not large, but valuable. Cullum asked whether I had seen it. I had not. Did the police know? Number Cullum advised against adding confusion to an accidental death inquiry. I covered the mouthpiece and told Wolfe. His lips tightened. Ask him, Wolfe said, whether his wife had insured it. She had, Ma answered when I put the question, with a photograph attached to the policy rider. That raised the little hairs on the back of my neck, a photograph of the pendant. Yes, who had the policy? Cullum's office handled the file. I relayed it. Wolfe shut his eyes. There. The locket was empty when Ma threw it away. 2 photographs had been removed from it years before. One may have been of the pendant, or related to it, or perhaps something else altogether. Continue. I asked Ma one more thing. Did your wife ever use the locket after the photographs were gone? I don't know. I never saw it again. When I hung up, the room held that charged stillness I had learned to respect. It meant Wolfe's mind had started setting pieces in rows. He opened his eyes. Archie, the locket is not merely a token. It is a container. A container once held pictures. Those pictures were removed. Cullum knew of missing property and suppressed that knowledge. Talbot visits a restorer who repairs lockets. Helena Voss knows Mrs. Marr and knows my name. Mr. Marr, out of cowardice, concealed his wife's warning for 8 years. Therefore, everyone in this affair is either withholding, afraid, or dead. That narrows New York by at least a quarter. He made a face. You may jest after you have earned it. I want Helena Voss here at 11 tomorrow morning. If she refuses, persuade her. Also, go to Emil Crane's shop and inspect his order book. You want legal persuasion or my smile? Use whichever is less expensive. The doorbell rang again. Fritz went. A moment later he appeared, and the set of his mouth told me the visitor had not improved the afternoon. Mr. Wolfe, he said. A lady. She says her name is Miss Janet Avery. Saul, still standing by the door, looked at me. I looked at Wolfe. Cullum's clerk, I said. Send her in. Wolfe told Fritz. Miss Avery entered fast, as if courage worked only at speed, and she was afraid it might expire at any corner. She was about 30, brown-haired, neat, frightened, and carrying a handbag with both hands, as if it were all that kept her vertical. Mr. Wolfe, she said, not bothering to sit. I had to come. I did not tell the police everything. Wolfe glared. That is a deplorable habit. Sit down and improve. She sat. Mr. Cullum gave me an envelope yesterday afternoon. He said it contained a statement naming the people tied to the old ration shortages, and that if anything happened to him, I was to deliver it unopened to Nero Wolfe. I stood up. That's neighborly. She nodded miserably. I was afraid. Then after the police left, I opened my drawer to get it, and it was gone. Wolfe's eyes flashed. Who had access to your desk? No one. I locked it. And this afternoon? She swallowed. This afternoon, when I returned from lunch, there was this in my handbag. She opened the bag and removed a small brass clasp, bright at the seam and sharp at the hinge. I took it, and for 1 second my fingers forgot to move. It was the missing mate to the locket on Wolfe's desk.
Chapter number 3. November tulips don't happen by accident. Somebody bent the rules of nature to make a lie bloom on purpose.
Chapter 3. The sister in the pantry. A murder in a lawyer's office can still pretend to be business. A death on a pantry floor has less dignity and more candor. It says somebody was admitted where only habit goes. That was how it struck me at 11:40 the next morning, when I got the call from Saul Panzer, just as Fritz was bringing coffee, and Wolfe was preparing to begin an interview with Helena Voss. I took the call at my desk. Saul's voice was flat, which meant the news had edges. Archie Mara's house. Clara Mara, his sister, dead in the pantry. I straightened. How dead? Eno. Doctor says within the hour. Kramer is on his way. Edwin Marr is here, and not fit for use. I thought you'd better come. I had that same thought before you did. Anything obvious? No signs of a break-in. Pantry and kitchen look ordinary, except for the body. One more thing. The bread box is empty. I told him I was leaving and hung up. Wolfe had heard enough from my side of it to identify the species. He was glaring at me and at fate with equal hostility. Helena Voss, seated in the red leather chair, turned her head, and her expression changed from guarded patience to sharpened interest. Well, Wolfe demanded. Clara Marr, Edwin's sister, found dead in the pantry. Wolfe shut his eyes for a second, perhaps in prayer, though I doubted the recipient. Parfui, Kramer again. Helena Voss said. Then I am not to be questioned. Wolfe opened his eyes. On the contrary, Archie, you will stay. I stared at him. With a fresh body at the client's house. Yes, Saul is there. The police will be there. You are more useful to me now in this room. Sit down. That is one of the irritations of serving a genius. He can sometimes tell you where you are useful before you know where you are. I sat. Helena Voss was a handsome woman of about 40, with dark hair, excellent grey eyes, and a manner that had been taught polish, and then improved by will. She wore the dark green suit Fred had described, and she sat very straight, not because she was stiff, but because she disliked yielding so much as an inch to furniture, strangers, or events. Wolfe looked at her. Miss Voss, you knew Laura Marr? Yes. Well. She glanced at me. Must Mr. Goodwin stay? He must. Then I shall choose my words carefully. You should choose them truthfully, Wolfe said. Care is secondary. That earned him the smallest possible smile. Laura Marr was my friend. Before that, she had been my employer for a time. I decorated her first apartment after her marriage. You also knew Victor Talbot? Yes. How? I met him through Laura. Did she have an affair with him? Helena Voss did not jerk or blink. She merely let her eyes cool. Mr. Wolfe, you are abrupt. I am efficient. Yes, she said. They had been intimate before her marriage. Afterward, I do not know. I suspected they saw each other. I know they quarreled. About what? An object. The diamond pendant. Her gaze came to me, so that has surfaced. Only enough to stain the water. She ignored that. Laura told me Victor had persuaded her to let him keep something for her. Something she did not trust in the house. Later she wanted it back. He delayed. Then he refused. Did she say why? Number, did she say what it was? Number, she only said it had become dangerous. Wolfe's lips moved. Dangerous because of value, or because of information? I asked that. She said both. That made the room seem smaller. Wolfe asked, did Howard Cullum know? Yes, you are sure? Laura told me she had spoken to him. She said if Victor did not return it, Mr. Cullum would know what to do. She was wrong. Did she name the object? Helena Voss hesitated. Not to me, but she once showed me a photograph, a snapshot, old and poor. It was of a young woman standing beside a summer house, and on the back, Laura had tucked a separate tiny photograph of the pendant. Laura? I asked. Number, another woman. On the back was written, June at Briarwood, 1939. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. June who? I do not know. Laura did not tell me. And the photograph is now where? Gone. She kept them in the brass locket. That got us all three, I said. Inside the locket. Yes, folded small. She said the locket looked sentimental and stupid, and therefore safe. Wolfe held up a hand. Archie! The removed contents. The locket as container. Continue, Miss Voss. Helena Voss drew a breath. A week before Laura died, She came to me frightened. She said Victor had become insolent and Howard cautious. She said Edwin knew nothing because Edwin preferred not to know difficult things. She asked if I would keep the locket for one night. You refused? Wolfe asked. Yes. Why? Because I already knew too much, and because I feared she was in earnest when she said the thing could break a family. Wolfe was silent. I said, What family? She looked at me. Mr. Goodwin, if I knew that, I would not be here guessing. Wolfe grunted. Did Laura later tell you where she put the locket? Numbered. Did you ever see Clara, Ma? Yes, several times. She disliked me. That is not rare, Wolfe said. Why? Because I was Laura's friend, and Clara believed friendship in women led directly to opinions. The phone rang. I reached for it. Saul again. Archie. Kramer is here, doctor says poison. Almost certainly taken in coffee not more than an hour before death. Pantry floor, one hand on a flour tin, other clenched, no overturning, no broken crockery, no struggle, kitchen table has bread. A delivery wrapper from Gristed Aids, 2 jars of marmalade, and 3 cups. Only 1 cup has residue enough for a lab. 3 cups. Yes, Edwin says he had coffee early. Clara, later. Housemaid, Bressler, claims she took tea, not coffee. Kramer is happy in his work. Anything in the clenched hand. Not now. The doctor opened it. Flour and a little scrap of paper too smudged to read. I thanked him and hung up. Wolfe had listened, his face getting less and less decorative. Well, he said. Poison, no struggle, 3 cups, paper scrap in the hand. Good God. Helena Voss murmured. Wolfe turned to her. Miss Voss, did Laura Ma ever mention a place called Briarwood? She frowned. Number, should it mean something to me? Perhaps not. Did she speak of Edwin Ma's family before marriage? Only to say that Clara managed Edwin's conscience in childhood and tried to continue after. I relayed Saul's details. Wolfe nodded once. A pantry. Of course, I said. Of course. When death chooses a pantry, Wolfe said, it is usually because someone trusts the kitchen more than the drawing room. Food is intimate. Kitchens admit familiars. Poison requires proximity or confidence or both. Clara Ma did not die because a stranger burst in with melodrama. She died because she was where she was expected to be. Helena Voss rose. Can I go? Yes, but not far. Archie will want your address. I suspect he already has it. He does, I said. After she left, Wolfe sat with his eyes shut. I knew the signs. He was arranging people into categories and would presently discover that none of them liked their assigned shelves. I said, I'm going. Yes, take the Locket clasp with you and the note. You expect Kramer to be impressed. Number, I expect him to be obstructive, but I want him informed enough to blunder in the correct direction. That was Wolfe at his most charitable toward the police. I got to East 63rd Street in 22 minutes because New York traffic, while indecent, occasionally loses interest in malice. Ma's house was a narrow brownstone with polished brass, severe curtains, and the look of a place where chairs stood exactly where they had stood since Cleveland. Saul let me in. Kramer was in the pantry doorway, broad and sour, with Sergeant Stebbins behind him taking in the room. Edwin Ma sat in the dining room beyond, grey and collapsed. Mrs. Bressler, the maid, was in the kitchen under the eye of a uniformed man, crying in a steady, resigned way that suggested tears were the only liberty she thought safe. Kramer turned when he saw me. You again? It saves your blood pressure. You can start annoyed. He grunted and jerked a thumb toward the pantry. Look. I looked. Clara Ma had been removed, but the shape of her remained. The pantry floor was black and white tile scrubbed into honesty. Shelves held jars, tins, sacks of flour and sugar, canned goods lined like obedient citizens. One flour tin stood lower shelf left, its lid crooked. There was a faint smear on the floor where the body had been. One apron string under the kickboard, and nothing theatrical at all. In the kitchen itself, The neat ruin of ordinary use spread across the table. One unsliced loaf, one knife, delivery wrappers, 2 open jars of marmalade, 3 cups, as Saul had said, 1 saucer with a brown ring dried on it. "No signs of force," I said. "Smart boy," Kramer growled. "She probably drank it and walked in there before she went down. Why the pantry? She was getting something or putting something back, or people walk into pantries, because that's where pantries are." He had a point, but I didn't tell him so. "Anything on the paper scrap?" I asked. "Not yet." I took the bright brass clasp from my pocket and showed it to him. "Miss Avery had this put in her handbag yesterday. It fits the locket that's been appearing in Ma's bread box." Kramer scowled at it. "You've got a whole toy store running." "Also this." I handed him the note. "You threw away the wrong thing." He read it and swore mildly. Wolf still sitting in his chair. Of course his chair has grown dependent on him. Kramer handed back the note. "Tell him if he's hiding anything. I'll pull his orchids up by the roots." That would be gardening, not police work. He might fail to respect the distinction. I went to Edwin Ma. He looked up as if from a cellar. "My sister," he said. "My God." "My sister," he said. "My God." "Mr. Ma, when did you last see her alive?" "At 9:30. She had come by unexpectedly. She did that sometimes. She said she wanted to see how I was. I told her about the locket. She became upset." "In what way?" "She said I ought to go to the police with everything at once." I said I already had. She said not everything. There it was. "What had you not told?" His hands moved helplessly. "She meant about Laura, about Victor Talbot, about the pendant. Clara always believed concealment was the first cousin of guilt. That is sharper than most family sayings." He shut his eyes. "She may have been right. Did Clara know your wife had spoken to Howard Cullum?" "Yes, Laura had told her so." "Did Clara know about the locket years ago?" A hesitation. "I think so. I once saw her holding it after Laura died." I let that sit a second. "Did you ask why? Number, why not?" He opened his eyes. "Mr. Goodwin, must you always ask why a man failed to be wise 8 years ago?" "Yes." He managed a bleak nod. "Then because in my family we had practiced silence until it became style." That was good enough for the moment. "Mrs. Bressler told me she had served coffee in the kitchen at 10:30. Because Clara said she hated formal rooms, and because Mr. Ma had no appetite for the parlor. Edwin had taken half a cup and left it. Clara had drunk most of hers. Mrs. Bressler had tea from her own pot. At 10:50 the delivery boy rang. She went to the door for bread and marmalade. When she came back, Clara was gone from the table. 2 minutes later she found her on the pantry floor. "Anyone else in the house?" I asked. "No, sir." "Any caller?" "No, sir." "Back door unlocked?" "It never is." "Who uses the pantry most?" "Miss Clara, when she came. She said kitchens tell the truth about people." That sounded like Clara Ma. It also sounded like a woman who had been around enough kitchens to know where people hid small things. I inspected the table. 1 cup nearly drained, 1 half, drunk, 1 scarcely touched. The bread wrapper was new, torn open with neat fingers. The loaf itself had not been cut. The marmalade jars had. 1 was orange, 1 black currant. Clara had wrinkled habits, Saul said, and strong opinions. It was just possible she had come to inspect a frightened brother, and decided to make breakfast of his pantry while rebuking him. Stebbins came in with a small envelope. Labman found this under the table leg. He handed it to Kramer, who looked and then gave it to me because he knew I would stand there until he did. It was a sales slip from a shop on Lexington Avenue. Emil Crane Restorations Repair Metal Catch. Polish exterior paid cash. No customer name, date, 5 days ago. Kramer said something impolite. I said, "That's neighborly too." "Shut up," he said. "Talbot. Possibly. Likely. Possibly too likely." That improved his temper by making him angrier. He put the slip away and told Stebbins to get Crane. I left the police to their exercise and took a taxi back to West 35th Street. Wolfe was in the office where I had left him, naturally, though the room had changed because his mind had been at work in it. "Well?" he asked. I told him all of it, including Clara's remark that Edwin had not told everything and the sales slipped from Crane. Wolfe listened without interruption, fingers together, eyes narrowed. When I finished, he said, the sales slip was under a table leg. Yes, visible, not until moved. Good, someone dropped it there, perhaps recently, perhaps not. The poison was in the coffee. Likely, 3 cups. Clara drank hers, Ma partly drank his. The maid took tea. Therefore, if the poison was in a cup, someone knew which cup Clara would use, or added it after serving. Yes, but there was no stranger. According to the maid. Wolfe shook his head. The maid may lie, but not well. Number Clara Ma entered a kitchen where she felt secure. She drank something offered in routine. Then she went to the pantry. Why? To fetch something. Or to confirm something, Archie. Clara knew more than her brother. She had held the locket years ago. She believed he was concealing facts. She comes this morning, hears of the locket's return, becomes alarmed, drinks coffee, then goes to the pantry and dies with flour in one hand and a paper scrap in the other. She was searching. For what? That, Wolfe said, is the only question in New York that currently matters. The phone rang. I took it, Fred. Talbot just left the gallery with a suitcase, Fred said, going fast. I looked at Wolfe. He had already seen my face. Well, Talbot is moving. Wolfe's lips pushed forward. Then Kramer must be fed before he starves us all. Call him. Tell him if he wants Victor Talbot, he had better stop admiring his own theories and start climbing stairs.
Chapter 4. Some people walk in the room and bring trouble with them. Iris Harrow didn't just own flowers. She owned the kind of weather secrets grow in.
Chapter 4. The Delivery Door and the Quiet Passage. By 4 o'clock that afternoon, New York had settled into one of those grey moods, when even the taxi horns sound tired. And I was on my way back to East 63rd Street with a notebook in my pocket and a view of the case that had improved from fog to mist. Wolfe had sent me with instructions brief enough to sound simple and therefore dangerous. Discover, he had said, how many people may enter that kitchen without causing alarm. Also, do not be run over. Your usefulness is greater intact. The brownstone looked as it had in the morning, composed and proper, and one insult away from indignation. The police had thinned out. A uniformed man was still at the front. But Kramer had gone to pursue Talbot, which I regarded as healthy for all concerned. Saul had stayed on long enough to note faces and movements, and then peeled off after the inspector, leaving the field to me and any domestic ghost still on duty. Mrs. Bressler admitted me through the side entrance at the alley, and that was my first answer before I had asked the question. The side door opened directly into a narrow passage, tiled, scrubbed, and practical, with hooks for aprons on one wall and a shelf for parcels on the other. 10 feet farther in was the kitchen, and beyond that, the pantry where Clara Ma had died. The bread box sat on a sideboard near the kitchen window, an innocent square of enameled tin that had lately developed criminal associations. I stood in the passage and listened. From there, a man could enter, set down bread, milk, vegetables, flowers, or a packet of poison, and be heard no more distinctly than a spoon in a saucer. Mrs. Bressler, red-eyed but steadier than before, folded her hands in her apron. Well, Mr. Goodwin, I want routine, I said. Not emotion, not opinions. Feet, doors, packages, and names. Who uses this entrance? The baker's boy mornings. The milkman, though less than he once did. The grocer's porter, with orders. Laundry sometimes. Ice, years ago. Not now. Tradesmen if they're expected. Miss Clara always preferred it when she came early. She said front doors were for vanity. I nodded. And when they come in, do they wait to be announced? She looked surprised. No, sir. Not if they're regulars. They set things down. If I'm in the pantry or upstairs, they call out. And if you don't answer, they leave the parcels. Near the bread box, often, there it was. Plain as butter routine had made the kitchen porous. Any visitor wearing usefulness could cross its threshold unseen, unheard, or rather heard without comment. A step in a hallway may start inquiry. A step in a service passage only confirms civilization. I spent 40 minutes with Mrs. Bressler, the delivery slips, and a wall calendar that held more intelligence than half the people in the case. The baker delivered 6 mornings a week. The milkman came Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and any extra bottle requested by card. Christide sent a porter irregularly, but often enough to be ordinary. Edwin Marr, whose life was guided by habit as a tramcar is guided by rails, never came to the side passage unless driven by appetite or alarm. Clara had used it like an inspecting colonel, I asked. Has anyone new come lately, any substitute boy, new porter, odd errand? She thought. Last Thursday, the baker's usual boy was not himself. A different one came. You noticed because? He whistled. The other does not. What did he look like? Chown, cap low, freckles. Maybe he carried 2 loaves and called me ma'am. That narrows it to all creation under 23. Did he go farther than the shelf? I don't know. I was upstairs. And the bread, she pointed. There by the box. Did you see him leave? No, sir. Did Mr. Marr mention the locket that day? No, sir. He found it Friday morning first. That was something, not a revelation, but a rung on the ladder. I inspected the side passage more closely. The lock was sound. The jamb showed old scratches from boxes and wet weather. Nothing fresh. A man admitted for trade could stand half in and half out, place or remove a small object, and depart without entering the kitchen proper. The bread box was 3 paces away. On the shelf near the door stood a ledger for deliveries, which Mrs. Bressler said she kept because stores are cheerful with mistakes when not corrected. It listed dates, items, and initials. On Thursday, 2 rye loaves, 1 white. Friday, 1 rye. Saturday, 2 white. Monday, 1 rye. Marmalade Tuesday. No bread, due to Miss Clara's preference for toast made from yesterday's loaf. Wednesday, the morning of her death, 1 rye, 1 white, 2 marmalades. Exactly as on the table, I said. Who signed for Wednesday? I did, after the delivery. Yes. Did the porter come into the kitchen? He always does. Did you watch him the whole time? She hesitated. No, sir. I was at the stove. How long was he here? A minute. A minute is enough to start a war. She gave me a bleak glance. I would rather it had been enough to prevent one. I went out the side entrance and walked the alley to the corner, then around to the bakery. The boy behind the counter told me, after I described last Thursday's substitute, that yes, their regular lad had been home with a cold, and a cousin named Tommy had taken the route. Tommy what? He scratched his neck. Never knew. He's Mrs. Cappel's sister's boy from Queens. Do you know where in Queens? No, sir. I thanked him with the kind of smile that deserved better material and went to the dairy. The milkman remembered the Marr house, but nothing useful. Side door, sure. Bottle rack inside. Maid's a sticker for count. He had never seen a locket, poisoner, or ghost, which I accepted as reasonable limits. At Christide's, I had better luck. The delivery manager knew the porter who had gone Wednesday morning. Name's Rizzo, he said. Been with us 6 months, solid. Solid men have been known to bend. He ignored that. Police already asked. He says he brought bread and marmalade. Side door, maid at stove. Man customer in dining room. Woman voice somewhere back. Set parcels down and left. Did he go near the bread box? That's where the shelf is. Did he touch anything else? A shrug. He says no. I got Rizzo's address and left him to groceries. On the sidewalk outside, I paused long enough to let the pieces move around in my head. The side entrance made the trick with the locket almost easy. Not magic, not haunting, not secret passage nonsense. Simply placement, repeated where daily habit guaranteed discovery. Anyone who could gain the kitchen as a useful presence could slip the locket into the bread box in 3 seconds. The message had been planted where routine would do the announcing. I called Wolfe from a drugstore. Well? He asked. The kitchen is a public institution in an apron. Baker's boy, milkman, grocer's porter, expected tradesmen, and family all use the side entrance. Nobody in that house thinks twice about footsteps near the bread box if the footsteps sound like employment. Good, therefore. Therefore the locket was never meant as a secret visitation. It was a message placed for guaranteed discovery. Obviously. Yes, but now it's obvious with supporting cast. Anything else? Thursday there was a substitute baker's boy. Wednesday the grocer's porter had access within a yard of the bread box. The maid watched neither closely enough to swear they only delivered bread. Good, continue. Where routine leads. Find whether Clara Ma also used the side entrance this morning. That one I already have. She often did, especially on early visits. Silence. Then, Archie, routine is not merely access. It is camouflage. A person who comes by the side door belongs to function, and function is invisible. Clara went to the kitchen because that was her route into the house and into the matter. Someone else used the same privilege. Return here, I want to think. That is always discouraging when you are standing in a drugstore with a notebook full of honest labor. But he was right. The facts were better company for Wolfe than for me. When I got back to the brownstone on West 35th Street, Saul was in the office, and by the set of his mouth, I knew he had something to report that would either help enormously or annoy Wolfe into eloquence. He chose annoyance first. Talbot was at his apartment for 20 minutes, Saul said. Then he left with no suitcase because Kramer got there in time to interrupt his travel ambitions. He was taken downtown for questioning. I sat. Did he enjoy it? Probably not. Kramer did. Wolfe's eyes were half closed. Was anything found? Saul nodded. In Talbot's apartment, a locked dispatch box. Kramer got it opened. It contained letters from Laura Ma to Talbot, old receipts from an antiques gallery, 2 insurance papers not in Talbot's name, and a photograph. I leaned forward. What photograph? A young woman in a garden beside a summer house, Saul said. On the back, written in ink, June at Briarwood, 1939. That drew no movement from Wolfe except a slight tightening of the lips. Where is the photograph now? He asked. With Kramer. Befoo, I said. Any pendant? No pendant. Any explanation from Talbot? Saul's mouth twitched. Several. He says Laura asked him to keep papers for her because she feared her husband's sister. He says the photograph meant nothing to him. He says Howard Cullum was blackmailing someone, though not him. He says nearly everything except the truth. Wolfe nodded, as expected. I told them what I had learned about the side entrance, the substitute baker's boy, the delivery shelf, and the easy access to the bread box. Wolfe listened, fingers touching. At last, he said, we have escaped superstition. The house is not haunted. It is merely badly managed. That should comfort everybody. He ignored me. The repeated placement of the locket required opportunity, not intimacy. The poisoning required more. Clara Ma died because she trusted the kitchen. She trusted it because usefulness passed through it all day. There is no stronger disguise. The phone rang. I took it. It was Kramer, and his voice had a rasp in it that meant he had spent an hour with Victor Talbot and got only half the lies he deserved. Goodwin, tell Wolfe Talbot admits the locket was repaired by Emil Crane. Says Laura gave it to him years ago. Says he put a new clasp on because it kept springing open. I covered the mouthpiece. Talbot admits the repair. Says Laura gave him the locket years ago. Wolfe grunted. Ask when. When, I said. Kramer answered. A week before she died. That made me uncover the mouthpiece entirely. And Talbot says he never put it in Ma's bread box. He says he hasn't seen it since 1938. And if that sounds crazy to you, get in line. It sounds crowded, I said. Anything else? Yes, Talbot says Clara Ma visited him 3 days ago. That got Wolfe to open his eyes all the way. I repeated it, Wolfe said. Ask why. Why, Kramer growled. Because she wanted the photograph. Not the pendant, not the letters, the photograph. Talbot says she offered money. I thanked him and hung up. For a moment nobody spoke. Then I said, So Clara wasn't just a righteous sister dropping by to scold Edwin, she was in the hunt. Yes, Wolfe said softly, for the photograph. Not the pendant, not the locket. The photograph, Saul said. You think the photograph is the key? Wolfe turned his head. No, Mr. Panzer. I think it is the lock, I said. Then who is the door? Wolfe looked at me with a kind of patience he reserved for the teachable when they were trying. We have a young clasp and an old shell, he said. A repaired locket and a missing picture, a lawyer dead, a sister poisoned, and a house whose kitchen admits anyone who arrives carrying necessity. Clara Marr sought the photograph from Talbot 3 days ago. Today she dies after telling her brother he has not disclosed everything. The side entrance explains access. It does not explain urgency. Something changed recently. Cullum's fear, I said. The envelope to Miss Avery. Yes, and perhaps Talbot's sudden desire to travel, Archie. Tomorrow morning you will see Emil Crane and learn everything he has forgotten to tell the police. Then you will see Miss Avery again. If a man leaves an envelope with instructions for my receipt and that envelope vanishes, I become peevish. That's one word. Also, Wolfe said, get me the layout of any place called Briarwood connected to the Marr family. Saul frowned. Country house, probably, and probably old money. June at Briarwood, 1939, is not the sort of inscription one writes on a photograph of no importance. Somebody has been killing to control it. I prefer to know why before they improve their score. Fritz entered then to announce dinner, and the smell coming with him of roast duck, onions, and good judgment made the room remember civilization. Wolfe rose, which in him was not a movement, but a declaration. As he went to the dining room, he turned once and said, Archie. Yes. The kitchen is porous. The household habits are negligent. The message was placed where it would certainly be found. Therefore, the sender understands domestic routine intimately. I nodded. Family servant, tradesman, or someone coached by one. Precisely. He moved on. I stayed a moment at my desk, looking at the notes, hearing faintly the sounds of West 35th Street outside, and Fritz's plates within. And I had the queer feeling cases sometimes bring when they are beginning to reveal their shape. Not the solution, nothing so generous. Only the outline of the trap. What had looked like a ghostly return was in truth a delivery, and somebody, by God, had signed for it.
Chapter 5. In this town, beauty never stays harmless for long. By the time the banker hit the floor, the tulips were still standing like they knew more than the witness.
Chapter 5. The thing inside the thing, one of the penalties of working for Nero Wolfe, is that after you have spent 2 days chasing people, keys, deliveries, poison and memory, he may sit in his chair, point at a brass trinket, and prove that the most important witness in the case has been on his desk all along. That happened a little after 11 the next morning. I had been out since 9, first to Emil Crane's repair shop on Lexington, then to Howard Cullum's office to see Miss Janet Avery again. I came back to the brownstone with a notebook full of scraps and the pleasant certainty that several people were lying for different reasons, which is always healthier than having one person lie for none. Wolfe was at his desk. The brass locket lay on the blotter beside the detached clasp Miss Avery had found in her handbag. Saul Panzer was there too, quiet and patient. Fritz had just brought coffee, and the office had that civilized stillness which in our house usually comes before either illumination or lunch. Well, Wolfe asked. I gave him Crane first. Crane was a long-faced mechanic in a grey coat who treated metal as if it were nobility and customers as if they were not. He admitted that Victor Talbot had brought him the locket 5 days earlier. The catch was split, he told me. I made a new one, filed the seam, polished the shell. Cheap old thing. Did you open it? Of course. Anything inside. He had hesitated just long enough to be worth watching. A bit of folded paper, he said. Very small, under the inner rim. What kind of paper? Old numbered stamped, no value to me. Did you give it back to Talbot? Number, I set it on the bench, later it was gone. I told Wolfe that, then reported on Miss Avery. Cullum had given her a sealed envelope the afternoon before he died and told her that if anything happened to him, it was to go to Nero Wolfe. She locked it in her desk. The next morning it was gone. She knew nothing of the contents, only that Cullum had been frightened and had written something longhand before sealing it. When I finished, Wolfe put out his hand. The locket, Archie. I gave it to him. He opened it and studied the empty oval recesses where portraits should have been. Then he held out his hand again. Lens. I brought the magnifying glass. After a moment he said, tweezers. I got those too. He inserted one point under the inner rim of the left compartment and worked with the care of a surgeon who disliked the patient. Something gave. He drew out a tiny folded packet, tied with dark thread, so small it could have hidden in a coin purse for half a century. Well, I said, the thing had a private thought. Wolfe snipped the thread, unfolded the packet, and flattened it on the blotter. It was not a portrait, it was not a lock of hair, it was a ration ticket. Even before Wolfe said it, I knew. The paper, the faded official stamp, the serial number, all of it had the government look of wartime discipline. Opened flat. It showed a district code and a date stamp from 1944. I stared. Good Lord. Not Lord, Wolfe said. Wartime. Saul leaned forward. Food ration. Yes. I bent over it with the lens. Somebody hid a ration ticket in a locket for 80 years. Wolfe sat back. During shortages, stolen food coupons could fill a basement and bury a reputation, not merely petty theft. Organized diversion, black market traffic, purchased silence. If this can be tied to a ration book, and the ration book to a person, then our dead have been circling not jewelry but history. That put a different light on everything. Laura Marr had hidden the locket. Talbot had repaired it. Clara Marr had wanted the photograph that had once been kept in it. Cullum had tried to send Wolfe a statement and died before it arrived. Clara had pressed her brother to tell everything and was poisoned before noon. I said, so the diamond pendant was never the center of it. No, Wolfe said. Glitter is camouflage. The locket was not a keepsake, it was a container. A brass carrier pigeon. Yes, the phone rang. It was Fred. Helena Voss had just visited Talbot, and while they argued, he heard one word when the door opened. Ticket, I told Wolfe. He closed his eyes. Of course, that was his way of saying, the universe had finally contributed something useful. I went to the directory, and my notes on Briarwood. It had been real. A Marr family estate in Westchester, sold off after the war. Horace Marr, Edwin's father, had owned it. Old family house, I said. Wartime household, servants, deliveries, storage rooms. Wolfe nodded. And wartime shortages. A family scandal involving diverted ration coupons in 1944 could still poison the present if it touched inheritance, reputation, or blackmail. I looked again at the tiny yellowed ticket on the desk. So the thing inside the thing is what people have been killing over. Perhaps not the thing itself, Wolfe said. What it proves. Fritz entered then to announce lunch, and the smell of roast chicken and tarragon moved into the room like a civilized correction. Wolfe rose, but before he went he picked up the ration ticket once more and looked at it with deep disapproval. Archie, he said. Yes. Never trust a sentimental object. It is usually smuggling something. He left for the dining room. I stayed where I was, looking at the little scrap of paper that had ridden in a brass shell through years of silence, fear, and 2 murders. Outside, New York went on feeding itself. Inside, in the brownstone, on West 35th Street, we had learned that the locket had never held love or mourning. It had carried evidence. Fay Chapter 6. Wartime hunger leaves long shadows. Fay the ration ticket. Sent me where such things always send a man in New York, to dust, ledgers, and people who have forgotten only the parts they prefer not to remember. Wolfe, Having examined the little scrap of wartime paper, as if it were an undercooked mushroom, pushed it toward me after lunch and said, "Archie, this is not a clue. It is an address. Go read it." That is one of his more annoying talents. He can make 3 words do the work of a memorandum and an insult. So I spent the afternoon in 2 municipal basements, one insurance office, and a charity archive run by a woman who believed anyone asking for records from 1944 was either a scholar or a thief. Since I was not in a mood for scholarship, I let her guess the other. The ration ticket itself was not enough to name a thief, but it was enough to name a district, and the district was enough to open a door or two. The code pointed to a wartime allocation office on the Lower West Side, one of the several depots where paper became food by authority of stamps, signatures, and a great national faith in lines. During the war, ration books had meant sugar, butter, meat, canned goods, coffee, and every other item likely to inspire patriotism in speeches and profanity in kitchens. A missing ticket was a nuisance. Missing rolls of them could become a business. At the first office, I got a clerk who was young enough to regard 1944 as an archaeological period. At the second, I found an old records man named Hanley, who wore sleeve protectors and the expression of someone who would rather be unjustly accused than hurried. He read the number from my notebook, disappeared for 14 minutes, and returned with a ledger that looked heavy enough to settle an estate by impact. "You won't get much," he said. "Half these cross indexes were cleaned out in 58. I've had less and done more." He considered me with suspicion and turned pages. District 6, B supplemental food allotments, institutional issue. That got my attention. Institutional boarding houses, relief kitchens, veterans' family programs, charitable feeding permits, that sort of thing. He ran one finger down a column. "There," he said. "Batch issued to neighborhood relief. Kitchen permit number 44 to 117, West 63rd Street District, monthly transfer list. Some irregularity noted later." What irregularity? He peered. Shortfall under audit, not prosecuted wartime backlog. Who signed? He angled the ledger. Initials only. CM. I thanked him without enthusiasm, because the initials had landed exactly where they could do the most harm. Clara Ma, that alone meant nothing conclusive. In wartime, half the city had lived on initials and shortages, but it meant enough to go on with. The neighborhood relief kitchen turned out to have been a church basement operation 3 blocks from the Marr house, started for widows, boarders, and veterans' families, who could stretch soup farther than meat, but not indefinitely. The records, such as they were, had survived in boxes tied with string and smelling of damp paper and old virtue. The supervisor in 1944 had been one Mrs. Agnes Bell, deceased. Her assistant had been Clara Ma, then 30 and already famous, if the notes were to be believed, for keeping accounts as if God himself were likely to ask for a receipt. I copied names, dates, and supply tallies. In 3 successive months, the kitchen's books showed deliveries lower than the allotment office's issue sheets, not dramatically lower. By wartime standards, enough to raise eyebrows, but not a tribunal. £10 missing here, 12 there. Coffee short. Canned milk not received. Lard reduced. Hunger measured carefully becomes arithmetic. Arithmetic repeated becomes theft. By 5:30 I had another name. The delivery contractor handling the kitchen's allotted goods in that district had been Simon Drake. I knew the name already, though I hadn't yet known why it bothered me. It had been in one of the old Briarwood invoices I had copied the night before, attached to produce and household supply runs to the Marr estate during the war. Same name, same business, small trucking, local contracts, food carriage under ration supervision, when there was profit to be made from carrying hunger from one address to another. I took a cab back to the brownstone on West 35th Street, with New York in its evening shift outside the window, theaters waking up, offices letting loose, delivery trucks still making their confessions at curbside. Hunger had changed costume since 1944, but the city had not altered its appetite. Wolfe was in the office, naturally, installed at his desk with beer and a face suggesting that the world had again failed to arrange itself for his convenience. Well, he said, I gave it to him in order. The ration ticket comes from an institutional allotment batch, not a household ration book. District 6B, issued to a relief kitchen permit on West 63rd Street in 1944. Audit later showed shortfalls. The issue sheets bear the initials CM Clara Ma, Wolfe said. Yes, she kept the household books for the kitchen. And Edwin? That came next. Edwin Ma worked part-time in a depot office that year. Allocation routing, transfer slips, inventory support. Not high rank, but close enough to paper to know how paper traveled. Wolfe grunted. A timid man near authority is often more dangerous than a bold one near money. He learns the system without having the courage to resist its uses. I went on. The kitchen records show repeated shortages, not enough for headlines, enough for bitterness. And the delivery contractor serving both the kitchen and the Briarwood estate was Simon Drake. Wolfe's eyes opened wider. Now he owns Drake Provision Carriers, or what is left of it, office in Long Island City, one prior charge in 1951 for invoice padding, dismissed, no prison, no sainthood. Saul Panzer, who had come in silently sometime during my report, said, I know the name hard operator, keeps his books cleaner than his conscience. I nodded. There are whispers, not proof, of a wartime theft ring that skimmed food allocations meant for boarding houses and veterans' families. Nothing large enough for federal fame, but enough to feed a black market. Coffee, butter, canned meat, sugar. Goods vanish on paper here, reappear as cash there. Wolfe leaned back. And in wartime, no theft is abstract. Stolen food means empty plates somewhere specific. Yes, which would explain why an old ration ticket could still carry poison in 2026. He made a face. Do not drag us into the current year. The dead are sufficiently occupied without chronology. That was Wolfe. He could correct your calendar while solving murder. I sat and lit a cigarette. There's more. Briarwood appears in the same supply chain. During the war, the Ma Country House kept operating with staff, guests, and regular deliveries, even during the tighter ration months. Either they were very efficient or very well supplied. Meaning someone at Briarwood may have enjoyed shortages less than other people did. Wolfe folded his hands across his middle. Edwin at the depot office. Clara with the relief kitchen books. Simon Drake moving goods between institutional allotments and a privileged household. Laura Mara later acquires a locket containing a ration ticket and a photograph marked June at Briarwood, 1939. Howard Cullum attempts to communicate with me and is killed. Clara presses Edwin and is poisoned. Mr. Talbot repairs the locket. Miss Voss knows enough to argue over a ticket. Hunger forgives nothing. No, I said. Not even after peace declares itself. He nodded once. Exactly. The phone rang. I took it. It was Fred. Talbot had another visitor, he said. Older man, heavy shoulders, grey overcoat. I got a picture from the building doorman's description. It's Simon Drake. That put a little iron into the room, I told Wolfe. He said, of course. Talbot is not central. He is a custodian with vanity. Drake is older freight. I asked Fred where Drake had gone. A warehouse office in Long Island City, then home to Forest Hills. No sign of panic. Men like Simon Drake did not panic. They recalculated. When I hung up, Wolfe was scowling at the ration ticket as if it had personally wasted his time by being historical. Archie, what is missing? I knew better than to answer too fast. Proof connecting the ticket to a particular theft, proof of who kept it, proof of why Laura Marr had it. And June, Wolfe said. Always June. The photograph matters because it converted paper into a person. Maybe June saw something. Or was something, he said. An employee, a relative, a guest, a boarder, a victim. Find her and the past stops being coy. I got out my notes on Briarwood again. One household inventory from 1944 lists, summer staff from the previous years. 2 names crossed out. One of them is June Bell. Wolfe's head came up. Bell. Yes. Agnes Bell ran the relief kitchen. June Bell, Very likely Agnes Bell's daughter, had been at Briarwood before the war, Saul said, and photographed at Briarwood in 1939 wearing the pendant. That, I said, would put a relief kitchen family close to the Marr estate before the war, then inside the ration shortage mess during it. Wolfe closed his eyes. Good. Better. There is a structure now. Class, proximity, hunger, paper, concealment. I begin to see the bones. I hate it when he says that. It means I have done 6 hours of legwork, and he has just reached the point of becoming interested. Fritz entered to announce dinner, wearing the expression of a man who could forgive murder more easily than cold sauce. Wolfe rose, but at the door he turned. Archie. Yes. Tomorrow morning. Get Simon Drake here. That may require persuasion. Then persuade him. If he refuses, tell him Nero Wolfe is examining ration thefts involving veterans' families and relief kitchens. If he has any remnant of prudence, he will come to prevent the truth from being told badly. And if he has no prudence, then Kramer will fetch him eventually, and less comfortably. He went to the dining room. I stayed at my desk a minute, looking at the ration number, Clara's initials in the copied ledger line, and the name Simon Drake written twice in 2 decades, once beside wartime deliveries, and once beside a modern lie. Outside, Manhattan kept eating under electric lights. Inside, in the old brownstone with orchids upstairs and duck downstairs, the past had finally admitted what kind of shadow it cast. Not romance, not inheritance. Hunger. Chapter 7. Coercion served fresh each morning by Thursday morning. The case had acquired the kind of shape Nero Wolfe both preferred and despised. He preferred it because the facts had begun to arrange themselves into a design. He despised it because the design included human meanness, and human meanness, once understood, bored him. Simon Drake had not yet arrived. He had sent word through a lawyer that he was a busy man and resented insinuations. Wolfe, reading the message after breakfast, snorted and said a busy man is merely one who has mismanaged his priorities. Then he told me to sit down and stop prowling. I sat. The office was in good order. The windows gave us a washed New York morning, pale light on West 35th Street, trucks making deliveries with all the grace of artillery, pedestrians already practicing irritation. Fritz had removed the breakfast things and left coffee. On Wolfe's desk lay the locket, the ration ticket in its envelope, my copied notes from the relief kitchen records, and one blank pad on which Wolfe had written 4 names in his broad, heavy hand. Goodwin Marr, Clara Marr, Simon Drake, Laura Marr. He was staring at them, as though they had failed an examination. Well, I said. He opened his eyes. Archie, when a man receives the same object in the same place 6 mornings in succession, what is intended? Annoyance, nerves, loss of appetite. Those are effects, I asked intention. Pressure. Yes. Not grief, not memory. Pressure. He touched the locket with one finger. The thing was returned not to awaken sorrow for a dead wife, but to tighten coercion on a living man. I leaned back. You've decided Edwin Marr was being handled, not haunted. I decided that when the object began keeping appointments with bread, Wolfe's lips moved. Bread arrives daily. Bread is habitual. Bread requires no announcement. Questions do. Therefore the bread box was chosen because it would deliver the warning without requiring speech. That tracks. Whoever planted the locket counted on routine to do the work. Exactly. A message is strongest when it appears inevitable. Mr. Marr rises, opens the box, and finds the past waiting. He is made to understand that privacy is penetrated, household habit observed, and silence expected. I nodded slowly. So the note, "You threw away the wrong thing," was less about the locket than about obedience. You had the evidence and discarded it. Somebody wanted him reminded. Yes, and frightened into passivity, which means Edwin knew more than he admitted. Of course he did. He worked at a depot office during the war. Clara kept the books for the relief kitchen. Simon Drake moved goods through the district. A ration ticket from an institutional allotment batch is hidden in a locket that later comes into Laura Marr's possession. There is no innocence in that arrangement. There is only degree. That was Wolfe. He could take a human tangle and strip it to the hard wires. I said, then why pressure Edwin now, after all these years? He shut his eyes. Because bargains do not remain buried by age alone. Something recent disturbed the old equilibrium. I looked at the names on the pad. Laura's death, number too old. Howard Cullum's fear is recent. Clara's visit to Talbot is recent. Talbot's repair of the locket is recent. The vanished envelope is recent. Someone believed control was slipping, that someone being Drake. Probably, though not necessarily alone. The bell rang, Fritz answered. A minute later he entered and announced Simon Drake, as if announcing a contagious inconvenience. Drake came in broad and composed, wearing a dark overcoat, good shoes, and the expression of a man who had made his way by understanding two things early: that most scruples are negotiable, and most people fear being embarrassed more than being wrong. He was in his late 60s, thick through the chest, grey at the temples, with a blunt face that might once have passed for geniality, until money simplified it into confidence. He looked at Wolfe, then at me, then at the room. Mr. Wolfe, I came because I don't like my name mixed with dead people and fairy tales. Wolfe indicated the red leather chair. Then sit and extract it. Drake sat. I haven't got much time. That is a pity. I have a great deal. I enjoyed the small flicker in Drake's eyes. Men who run trucks and accounts and side bargains often believe they can dominate any room where they outnumber the silverware. Wolfe was bad for them, Wolfe said. You handled wartime food deliveries in the West 63rd Street district. Yes, legitimate contracts. You also served the Marr estate at Briarwood. Yes. You knew Clara Marr. Everybody knew Clara Marr. She could count soup crackers at 30 feet. And Edwin Marr. Sure. And Laura Marlater. Yes. Wolfe touched the envelope, holding the ration ticket. Did you participate in diversion of rationed goods meant for relief kitchens, boarding houses, or veterans' families? Drake gave him a look that had probably unsettled aldermen. It did nothing to Wolfe. Number, did you skim allotments? Number, did Clara Marr know of such skimming? Number, did Edwin? Number, did Laura? Number, Wolfe sighed. Archie, Mr. Drake mistakes denial for answer. I said, he may also mistake old age for immunity. Drake turned his head toward me just enough to show teeth without improving his expression. Listen, wise guy. Number, you listen, I said. 2 people are dead. One lawyer tried to get information to Wolfe before he got his skull cracked. A woman was poisoned in a pantry. Another man is carrying a repaired locket around Manhattan like a hot brick. If your business history is mixed in, this is not a price dispute. Drake settled back. You finished? For the moment. Wolfe said, did Clara Marr approach you recently? A pause. Yes. When? Last week. Why, she wanted to know whether some old district allotment records still existed. Why ask you? Because I was around then. That is not sufficient. Drake shrugged. Because she thought I'd know which papers were dangerous. Wolfe's eyes opened wider. Dangerous to whom? To anyone foolish enough to keep them. There it was, the first useful sentence he had uttered. Wolfe said, and did you tell her? Number. Why not? Because I mind my own business. I laughed. He swung to me. What's funny? A man who has spent 40 years making profit off other people's shortages saying he minds his own business. His jaw hardened, but Wolfe intervened. Did Clara Marr mention the ration ticket? Number, did she mention a photograph of June Bell at Briarwood? That hit him. Not much, but enough. His left hand moved once on the chair arm and then stopped. Wolfe saw it. Ah, he said. So she did. Drake licked his lips. She mentioned a picture. Of whom? She didn't say. You recognized the name June Bell. He said nothing. Wolfe nodded. Good, we progress. Was June Bell connected to the relief kitchen? Her mother ran it. And Briarwood. She was there some summers before the war. Companion. Helper. Whatever name people use when they want cheap respectability. I filed that. For whom? Drake looked at me. Mrs. Marr. Edwin's mother. That opened another door. Wolfe entered it first. And later. Latter nothing. The girl vanished into war work or marriage or trouble. I don't remember. Wolfe's mouth hardened. You remember very well. Drake spread his hands. Mr. Wolfe, you've got a dead lawyer, a dead old maid, and a lot of ancient dust. I hauled deliveries. That's all. Wolfe said softly. Number, that is not all. If it were all, the locket would not have returned. Mr. Marr was being pressured, daily, deliberately. Someone wanted him frightened, silent and obedient. That requires an old debt still enforceable. Bread was the instrument because bread enters the house without question. It appears each morning, and questions do not. Whoever sent the locket understood, not sentiment but coercion. Drake shifted in the chair, which was encouraging. A shifting man is a man who has discovered he is not as stationary as he hoped, I said. And Clara recognized it, not the shell, maybe, but what it carried. Once she saw the ration ticket, she knew the old theft was no rumor. Drake's head came around fast. Ticket. Too fast, too interested. Wolfe watched him. Yes, ticket. You did not know it had survived. Silence. Wolfe continued. Then your pressure on Edwin Marr was incomplete. You knew enough to frighten him with the locket, but not enough to know what remained concealed inside it. Drake stood up. I didn't pressure anybody. Sit down. It was not loud. Wolfe had no need to be loud. Drake sat. I said Clara must have seen the ticket after Edwin showed her the locket had returned. She knew the batch number or district stamp. She had worked the books. Then she understood that the old wartime skimming scheme was tied to a real preserved document, a live bargaining chip. Drake stared at me, then at Wolfe. You think too much. Wolfe grunted. Number Mr. Goodwin occasionally thinks exactly enough. Clara Marr saw the past become actionable. She then pressed her brother to reveal more. Shortly thereafter she was poisoned. Drake rose again more carefully. I want a lawyer. You already have one, I said. He sent your message yesterday. You mean you want to leave? Yes. Wolfe nodded. Go, but not far. Inspector Kramer will almost certainly wish to hear that Clara Marr asked you about dangerous papers and that you failed to mention this yesterday. Drake's face changed then. Not panic. Men like him save panic for bankruptcy and surgeons, but the confidence drained half an inch. You're bluffing. Wolfe closed his eyes. Archie. I picked up the phone and dialed. Drake watched me. When Kramer came on, I said, Inspector Simon Drake is here and leaving. Wolfe suggests you may wish to interrupt that. Drake swore under his breath. I hung up. Wolfe, eyes still closed, said, Mr. Drake. Hunger leaves long shadows because those who profit from it believe time will launder the fact. It does not. A ration ticket hidden in a locket is not memory. It is retained leverage. Someone kept it alive, and someone recently decided it must be collected. Drake put on his hat. I didn't kill anybody. Wolfe opened his eyes. Possibly not, but you know why someone did. Drake did not answer. He left as Fritz entered from the hall, carrying a tray of coffee. Fritz stepped aside with the dignity of a diplomat avoiding invasion. After the front door closed, I said, he didn't know the ticket was still in the locket. That rattled him. Yes, meaning he may have been using the locket itself as threat, without access to its full contents. Yes. Then who did have access? Wolfe looked at the names on his pad again. Laura. Perhaps Cullum. Perhaps Helena Voss. Certainly someone who understood that the old theft was not merely historical but negotiable in the present. The repeated return of the locket was enough to reduce him to obedience, because he had never ceased to fear disclosure. That he skimmed allotments. Not necessarily actively, but he knew. Clara likely knew. Drake certainly knew. Laura learned. That altered the balance. I looked at the bread box, sitting in my mind like a small square stage where the past had been performing every morning before breakfast. Coercion served fresh each morning, I said. Wolfe made a face. Do not become literary. The bell rang again. I looked at him. Kramer. Yes. He settled back in his chair. Good. Now the police may make noise while I think. That was all right with me. Chapter 8. Clara's last errand by Friday morning. The case had reached the stage where every new fact looked as if it ought to be the one that would make Nero Wolfe sit up, slap the desk, and declare the murderer with Roman thunder. That never happened. Wolfe did not slap desks. He merely absorbed facts until they became ashamed of remaining separate. I, meanwhile, had the less elegant job of going back over Clara Mara's last morning, until her movement stopped looking domestic and started looking deliberate. Wolfe sent me to do it after breakfast with one sentence. Archie, a woman does not die in a pantry merely because she wants cinnamon. She dies there because she went to fetch or hide something that mattered. That was sound enough. Kitchens do invite nonsense explanations. Anyone can say a woman went into a pantry for preserves, flour, tea, or piety. The trouble is that dead people often leave habits behind them, and habits, if you look hard enough, will object when a lie is told in their name. So I went to East 63rd Street again. The house had acquired the uneasy tidiness of a place recently visited by police and grief. The maid, Mrs. Bressler, admitted me through the front this time, perhaps because death had robbed the side entrance of some of its innocence. Edwin Marr was upstairs with a headache, which I thought likely and insufficient. Kramer had been there early and gone off to harass Simon Drake with official vigor. That left the kitchen, the pantry, and me. I stood in the doorway and looked. The room was as it had been before, only more itself for having killed someone. Kitchen tables have that quality. Once a death has occurred among cups and bread and marmalade jars, the ordinary objects stop pretending they are harmless. The sideboard with the bread box on it stood near the window. The table held a bowl of apples, a folded newspaper, a sugar jar, and no comfort. The pantry door was open. Shelves, tins, sacks, jars black, and white tile clean, exact unforgiving. Mrs. Bressler said, I told the police all I knew. I'm sure you did, I said. Now tell me what you overlooked. That offended her mildly, which was useful. People answer better when their dignity has been nudged but not damaged. She came in by the side door, Mrs. Bressler said. Miss Clara, I mean around 9:20 or a little after. Carrying anything. Her handbag and gloves, no parcels. Did she go first to Mr. Marr? Number she came straight to the kitchen and asked for coffee. She always said kitchens were for sense and parlors for pretense. That sounds like Clara. Yes, sir. Did she go into the pantry before coffee? Mrs. Bressler thought. Number not then, after. Yes. But only after she had been talking to Mr. Marr. I took out my notebook. Start at the beginning and give it to me in order. She did. Clara had arrived by the side entrance, removed her gloves in the kitchen, and asked whether Edwin had eaten, on learning that he had not. She remarked that fear was a poor breakfast and demanded coffee. Edwin came down a few minutes later, already strained. Clara pressed him to tell her exactly what had been happening with the locket and the notes. He told her enough to alarm her further. Mrs. Bressler served coffee. Edwin drank some. Clara drank most of hers. Then came the sharp part of the conversation, with Clara saying he had not told the police everything, and Edwin protesting in the style of a man defending himself against accuracy. Then what? I asked. Miss Clara stood up. Mrs. Bressler said. She said, if you won't speak, I will. Those were her words. That has the ring of her. She went toward the pantry. Why? I thought to fetch something. She knew where things were. Did she say what number did Edwin? He said, Clara, leave that alone. I looked up from the notebook. Exactly that. Yes, sir, that was better. Leave what alone? I don't know. I was at the stove. Then the delivery boy rang, and I went to the side door. Not boy, I said. Gristede's porter. Yes, sir. He brought bread and marmalade. How long were you at the door? A minute, perhaps a little more. I checked the items. When you turned back. Miss Clara was no longer in the kitchen. I thought she had gone into the dining room. Then I heard a small sound from the pantry. I went in and found her on the floor. No broken crockery, no overturned chair, No shout. Poison does not care for scenery. I went to the pantry and studied the shelves again. Flour tin lower left, sugar above, preserves to the right, dry goods below. A woman familiar with the room could reach half a dozen ordinary objects without thought. But Wolfe had been right. Clara had not gone there for spice or jam. She had gone because something in that pantry mattered. The police had already taken the obvious things. But they had missed one less obvious item because policemen, like all men, are at the mercy of where they expect significance to appear. On the hook just inside the pantry door hung Clara's apron. Mrs. Bressler said it had been taken off the body and set aside until the police collected the rest of her things. Kramer had looked at the pockets. He had not, apparently, looked at the hem. I did. One corner of the hem had a tiny roughness, as though something had been stitched there and then torn free in a hurry. I ran a fingertip along the seam and felt the remnant of thread. Then I saw, caught in one loose stitch, a short piece of grocer's twine, no more than 1.5 inches long. I eased it free. It was ordinary twine except for the dust on it, a fine reddish powder clinging near one frayed end. I held it under the kitchen window light. Mrs. Bressler said, "What is it?" Perhaps the first honest thing in this room. I wrapped it in my handkerchief and took it with me. Back at the brownstone on West 35th Street, Wolfe was in the office, having finished a conference with Theodore Horseman about orchids, and therefore in a condition of improved contempt for mankind. I put the twine on his desk. He looked at it. String, twine, found in Clara's apron hem, torn from something hidden there. His eyes sharpened. Apron hem. Yes, and dusted with this. I unfolded the handkerchief. He leaned forward. Red oxide. That was my guess. Saul, who was by the bookcase with a file in his hand, said, "Warehouse ledger dust." I turned. "You know it." "Yes. Drake's sheds use red dusting powder on stored account books and packing ledgers, cheap insect deterrent and mark coating. I saw it years ago on a transport fraud matter." That made the little piece of twine suddenly heavier than its size entitled it to be. I said, "Then Clara had something tied up with warehouse twine, or taken from a bundle that had been in Drake's sheds. She concealed it in her apron hem, or removed it from there." Wolfe nodded slowly, and went to the pantry not for household use but to hide or retrieve it before speaking to her brother. Exactly. He shut his eyes. That meant the machine had started. I gave him the rest. Clara's final words, Edwin's protest, leave that alone. The trip to the pantry immediately before collapse. The delivery interruption at the side door. The timing. When I finished, Wolfe said, "Good, Clara had decided. Too late to stop being afraid of the past." I sat. And someone caught her courage in the act. Yes. The phone rang. I took it. It was Kramer, sounding like a man who had spent his morning being contradicted by Simon Drake and his afternoon contemplating revenge through procedure. "What now?" he barked. "That depends," I said. "Do you know what red ledger dust looks like?" A pause. "Why?" I told him about the twine. He swore, then said, "Drake's warehouse foreman just admitted an older woman came there 3 days. Before Clara died, asked to see old shipping books from the war years. Gave no name. Description fits Clara. That fit too neatly to be anything but true." I repeated it to Wolfe. He opened his eyes. "There, she went to Drake's sheds, saw something, concealed or removed something linked to the ledgers. Then on her final morning attempted either to hide it in the pantry or recover it from there before forcing a confession from Edwin." I said, "Which means Clara had the nerve at last, but not enough time." Wolfe grunted. Courage is often expensive when purchased late. I told Kramer to get Drake's wartime ledgers if they still existed and hung up. Wolfe's fingers rested on the arm of his chair. Archie, reconstruct the sequence. Clara visits Drake's warehouse 3 days earlier. She learns or confirms something in the wartime shipping records, perhaps involving relief kitchen allotments, Briarwood deliveries, or both. She acquires either a scrap from a bundle, a note, or some marker tied with warehouse twine. She conceals it. On the morning of her death, she comes to Edwin. hears of the returned locket, understands immediately that the ration ticket has re-entered play, and realizes the old theft is not rumor, but a living bargain being enforced. She announces she will speak. Then she goes to the pantry to hide or retrieve the thing from her apron before confrontation. She is poisoned before she can complete the act. Or during it, I said. Yes. By whom? Wolfe made a face. Do not become tedious. We are not yet at whom. We are at how and why. If Clara carried evidence from Drake's sheds, the kitchen and pantry become not domestic space but transfer point. Someone else knew that. I looked at the little red, dusted twine on his desk and thought of the side entrance, the bread box, the routine deliveries, the invisible passage of usefulness through a New York kitchen. A woman had finally decided to stop being governed by shame and silence and wartime hunger. She had carried her courage into the pantry like contraband. And someone, by God, had seen it. Wolfe opened his eyes again. Archie. Yes? Get Edwin Marr here at 4 o'clock. You think he'll come? He will if you tell him Clara died trying to save him from the consequences of his own cowardice. That was a brutal message, but accuracy sometimes is. I picked up the phone. Outside the office windows, the city moved through another afternoon. Trucks unloading, porters carrying, useful footsteps coming and going without inquiry. Inside, in the old brownstone where Fritz guarded meals and Wolfe guarded logic, Clara Marr's last errand had at last stopped looking like a pantry visit. It had become what it was. An attempt to move evidence before somebody else did. Chapter 9. Wolfe sets the table. Nero Wolfe has a way of arranging a room that makes furniture seem complicit. By 6 o'clock that evening, the office on West 35th Street had ceased to be an office and become a stage set for exposure, with Wolfe at center, as immovable as a cathedral, and me at my desk prepared to assist at the sacrifice. He had ordered the gathering with the same tone he used for lunch, which in his case meant there would be no appeal. Edwin Marr came first, grey and diminished, wearing black gloves he did not remove until I took them from him and put them on my desk because their carefulness annoyed me. Mrs. Bressler arrived next, alarmed and respectful, looking as if she expected to be blamed for civilization. Simon Drake came 10 minutes later with his lawyer, but Wolfe refused the lawyer entry on the sound ground that he had invited a participant, not upholstery. Drake came in alone, carrying resentment like an overcoat. Then came the current baker, a young man named Capel with red ears and clean hands, followed by 2 retired clerks from the wartime district depot, Hanley and Murchison, whom I had dug up through records and persistence. Sol Panzer and Fred Durkin stood by as reserve artillery. Inspector Kramer was there too, because Wolfe had no intention of concluding a case only to have Kramer blunder off and arrest a lamppost. Helena Voss was present. So was Victor Talbot, subdued for once, perhaps because he had finally learned that antique charm is a poor shield against homicide. Janet Avery sat near the door, hands folded, still angry at the dead for involving her. When Wolfe had them placed to his liking, he leaned back, shut his eyes, and let the silence ripen. He did that on purpose. People will often betray more in a pause than in an answer. At last he opened his eyes. This case, he said, has been obscured by sentiment because a locket is a sentimental object, and because Mr. Marr is a sentimental coward. It has also been obscured by time, which is usually an accomplice to rogues. We will remove both. Nobody spoke. Fritz entered silently with beer for Wolfe and coffee for those civilized enough to want it. Then withdrew. Wolfe touched the glass but did not drink. First, he said, the brass locket returned to Mr. Marr's bread box each morning was not sent to awaken grief for Laura Marr. It was sent to tighten pressure. Bread arrives daily, and without question, the bread box was chosen because it guaranteed discovery while concealing authorship. Anyone entering by the side door in the guise of usefulness could approach it without alarm. Delivery access made the kitchen porous. The supposed haunting was merely a schedule enforced through ordinary household routine. Kramer grunted. Mrs. Bressler stared at Wolfe as if he had just accused the refrigerator. Wolfe continued. Second, the locket was not primarily a keepsake, but a container designed to look sentimental. Inside it, hidden beneath the inner rim, was a wartime ration ticket from an institutional allotment batch assigned to a neighborhood relief kitchen on East 63rd Street. That ticket connected to old shortages, skimmed deliveries, and a theft arrangement involving food allocated to boarding houses, relief kitchens, and veterans' families. One of the old clerks, Hanley, cleared his throat. Wolfe ignored him until he stopped. Third, the people positioned to know of that old arrangement were these: Edwin Marr, who worked in the depot office and understood the paper flow; Clara Marr, who kept the books for the relief kitchen and therefore saw the shortages; Simon Drake, who held the delivery contracts and moved the goods; and later Laura Marr, who learned enough to possess the locket and the photograph hidden within it. Drake shifted in his chair. Wolfe noticed, of course. "You may sit still, Mr. Drake," he said. "Movement is not escape." Drake said, "You've got no proof I stole anything." Wolfe's lips moved. "You built a respectable trade on a foundation of wartime stealing. That is not yet murder, but it is architecture." I enjoyed that. Drake did not. Wolfe lifted a finger. "We proceed in order, as with courses. Mr. Goodwin discovered that the locket's clasp had been repaired recently by Emil Crane at the request of Victor Talbot. Mr. Talbot carried it because Laura Marr had once entrusted it to him, along with the photograph inscribed June at Briarwood, 1939. He did not understand that the locket had once held both that photograph and, hidden beneath the rim, the ration ticket. Mr. Drake, however, learned enough to know the locket had resurfaced, and enough to fear what papers might still accompany it. Talbot said, "I told you I never put it in the bread box." "No," Wolfe said. "You merely repaired the means by which someone else could use it." Talbot opened his mouth and closed it again. Wolfe turned to Edwin Marr. "Mr. Marr, after your wife died, you threw the locket away because you feared what it represented, though you lacked the courage to learn exactly what that was. Recently, someone began returning it to you. You were intended to understand that silence was still required." Edwin Marr swallowed. "I did understand that. Yes, at last you speak truly, but you did not know the ticket remained inside. Had you known, you would have destroyed the locket more thoroughly." Marr's face went grey. "Yes," Kramer snapped. "You knew about the ration theft." Marr turned toward him with the look of a man who had spent 40 years refusing to look in mirrors. "Not at first. Later. Not all of it enough." Wolfe cut in before Kramer could enjoy himself. "Enough to be ashamed. Not enough to be brave. That is Mr. Marr's specialty." Clara Marr was less malleable. She knew the relief kitchen records did not balance. She knew Mr. Drake profited. She knew her brother had looked away. For years she remained silent because family shame is a powerful gag. But the return of the locket altered matters. She recognized that the old theft was no rumor. It had come back to collect. Mrs. Bressler gasped softly. Drake kept his jaw hard. Wolfe said, "Clara visited Mr. Talbot seeking the photograph. She visited Mr. Drake's warehouse, seeking old ledgers. She found enough to decide at last that silence was no longer tolerable. On the morning of her death, she confronted Edwin Marr in the kitchen. She said, 'If you won't speak, I will.' Then she went to the pantry not for preserves or spice, but to hide or retrieve evidence before making her declaration. He looked at me, I obliged. In Clara's apron hem I found a torn scrap of grocer's twine, marked with red dust used on warehouse ledgers in Drake's sheds. She had concealed something tied from Drake's records or bundles. She had been to the warehouse 3 days earlier. The foreman confirms it." Kramer nodded once, unwillingly impressed. Wolfe resumed. "Clara was killed because she understood one crucial fact. The ration ticket did not incriminate her brother first. It incriminated Simon Drake first. That landed. Drake came halfway out of his chair. That's a lie." "No," Wolfe said. "It is sequence, Mr. Marr, enabled by cowardice. You organized by appetite. The depot irregularities, the relief kitchen shortages, and the Briarwood oversupply all required a mover of goods and a falsifier of destination. Mr. Marr had access to paper, Clara to Counts. But you had transport goods vanish, only if someone physically takes them. Hanley, the old depot clerk, spoke at last. There were rumors, he said. Drake's manifests never sat right. Shut up, Drake snarled. Wolfe's eyes flashed. Be silent yourself. You used delivery access in the present exactly as you had used delivery contracts in the past. You had the locket placed in the bread box by a substitute bread route, and later by the grocer's passage, all to frighten Edwin Marr into surrendering any remaining papers. You meant him to yield documents that could tie the old theft to the wrong men while shielding the real organizer. If Edwin panicked, he would appear central. If Clara spoke, she had to die. Kramer leaned forward. You can prove he used delivery access. Yes, the substitute baker's boy was engaged through a cousin of Mrs. Couples and paid in cash by a middleman tied to Drake's company. Mr. Goodwin discovered the route. Mr. Panzer confirmed the payment this afternoon. Wolfe glanced at Saul, who nodded. As for the grocer's side entrance, Mr. Drake's current provision business still services Gristide subcontracting on overflow routes. The connection is routine enough to be invisible, which is why he relied on it. Drake looked at me then, not Wolfe, because he knew who had done the shoe leather. I smiled at him without affection. Wolfe's voice deepened. Howard Cullum learned enough to be dangerous. He prepared a statement for me and entrusted it to Miss Avery. The statement disappeared because Mr. Drake's agent searched the office after the murder and removed the envelope before the police sealed the rooms. Miss Avery then received in her handbag the detached clasp, intended as warning or mockery. Mr. Cullum was killed because he ceased to be cautious and was about to become useful. Janet Avery had gone pale again, but she did not look away. Kramer said, And Clara's poison? Wolfe nodded. Served in coffee prepared in a kitchen admitting routine traffic. Mr. Drake had already penetrated that routine with the Locket deliveries. Clara's courage forced haste. She recognized the ration ticket. She knew it exonerated Edwin from primacy. He was complicit, yes, but not origin. The ticket tied back to institutional shipments and warehouse handling, which pointed to Drake. Therefore, she was killed before she could say so plainly. Drake stood up all the way. This is fancy talk. You've got no witness. Yes, Wolfe said. I do. He turned his head. Mrs. Bressler. The maid nearly jumped. Me, sir. Yes, on the morning Clara died. When the Gristides porter came to the side door, you accepted the parcels. But you have omitted one thing because you regarded it as too trivial, and because triviality is the natural refuge of the frightened. What was in the porter's left hand besides the bread? Mrs. Bressler blinked, then stared, then put a hand to her mouth. A paper packet. Describe it. Brown paper, folded small. He set it on the shelf by the bread box. I thought it was for Mr. Marr. Exactly. A paper packet of the kind used to transfer powdered substances or folded documents. Clara went to the pantry immediately after, either having seen it or intending to reach what she had hidden there. When you returned from the door, she had collapsed. Kramer was on his feet now, too. What packet? Mrs. Bressler's voice shook. I don't know. It was gone, Wolfe said. Gone because Mr. Drake's man retrieved what Clara had come to move and left poison already in play. The pantry was not random. It was the hiding place Clara had chosen for the ledger page, and the interruption at the side door gave the killer the few seconds needed to doctor her cup before she could retrieve it. Drake swore and headed for the door. Fred Durkin was there first, not dramatically, simply existing where Drake wished he did not. Saul moved half an inch, which was enough to explain the rest. Kramer barked. Sit down. Drake did not. Stebbins, who had been wisely stationed in the hall, came in at speed, and Drake stopped being mobile. Wolfe sighed. Noise always noise at the end. Kramer rounded on Drake. All right, you filthy old thief. Drake's face had gone from brick to chalk. I didn't poison her. That, Wolfe said, is possible. You may have delegated. Men who steal food from the hungry seldom insist on handling every detail personally. He turned to Edwin Marr, who looked as if each word had been removing a layer of skin. Mr. Marr, Your guilt is not murder, but acquiescence. You knew enough in 1944 to stop it. You did not. Laura later learned enough to hold leverage because she had both the locket and the photograph. She died before using it fully, though whether by accident or design I shall address in a moment. Clara, at last, chose decency over family shame. It cost her her life. Nobody spoke. Then Helena Voss said quietly, "And Laura, was she killed too?" Wolfe looked at her. Laura Marr discovered the blackmail value of the ticket and photograph. She pressed Talbot, spoke to Cullum, and frightened Drake. Simon Drake arranged Laura Marr's death by using the old cellar stair with its loose runner and bad light after Laura threatened to expose what the locket contained. Clara understood afterward how it had likely been done, but lacked the courage to prove it. What had been called an accident was murder disguised as household mischance. The later killings followed when the same old secret began moving again. That left a stillness behind it like a slammed door. Wolfe picked up his beer, sipped, and set it down. "The table is cleared," he said. "Inspector Kramer, you may now gather the plates." Kramer did not thank him, which would have seemed unhealthy. He simply began issuing orders. And as Drake was taken out, protesting too late and too much, I sat at my desk and looked at the little brass locket on Wolfe's blotter. It had crossed from one war into another, from ration lines to respectable trade, from shame to pressure to murder. It had ridden in pockets, on bread routes, through a pantry, and into our office. A small thing, but Wolfe had set it on the table, and once arranged properly, it had fed everybody the truth.
Chapter 10. In the end, the trick wasn't no the poison, it was rarity. Because nothing fames a person better than something only they could have touched.
Chapter 10. Bread, River. And the weight of the past, the last act of a Nero Wolfe case, is never theatrical unless someone else insists on theatre. Wolfe himself prefers arrangement. He likes his facts where he can point to them, his people where he can displease them, and his conclusions served with as little spilled emotion as possible. So the next morning, with Simon Drake in custody, Edwin Marr in our office again, and Inspector Kramer present to prevent any citizen from developing sudden travel plans, Wolfe finished the matter as he always preferred, by reducing noise to structure. The office on West 35th Street was quiet, except for the city outside, which had its usual Friday appetite. Trucks muttered, horns complained, and somewhere below a man was selling newspapers, as if civilization depended on volume. Inside, Fritz had brought coffee and then withdrawn with the air of a man who approved of truth, if it did not delay lunch. The brass locket lay on Wolfe's desk. Beside it were the detached new clasp, the ration ticket in its envelope, the bit of grocer's twine with red warehouse dust, and a single sheet in a plastic sleeve, brown with age and creased at one corner. That sheet was the missing depot ledger page Clara had hidden in the pantry decades earlier, and Drake had believed lost with time. Wolfe touched it with one finger. "Mr. Goodwin recovered this yesterday evening from the false bottom of an old preserved tin in the Marr pantry. It had been concealed there for decades." Goodwin Marr shut his eyes. Kramer barked. "You knew it was there," Marr answered without looking up. "Number, I suspected Clara had hidden something years ago. I never found it." Wolfe grunted. "Because you did not wish to find it. That has been your chief occupation in life." The ledger page was plain enough, once you understood what you were seeing. It was a wartime depot record showing institutional allotments issued to the relief kitchen on East 63rd Street, matched against delivery transfers, supposedly made by Simon Drake's company. In 3 places, the receiving initials had been altered. In one place, the destination line had been shaved and rewritten. At the bottom, in another hand, was a notation never entered into the official bound book, short by £84 mixed goods, recheck Drake manifest. C.M. Clara Marr. I said. The red warehouse dust on the twine matched residue on the folded edge of the page. Clara must have taken it from Drake's stored ledgers, or kept it from the start and later retied it. Wolfe nodded. Yes, she preserved what Mr. Drake failed to destroy. Kramer leaned over the desk. And this proves Drake skimmed the goods. It proves more, Wolfe said. It proves sequence. The relief kitchen shortage was not clerical accident. The altered destination lines shifted goods intended for charitable distribution into private delivery channels. One of them Briarwood, the Marr estate, where the household continued to receive comforts notably absent from poorer tables. Mr. Drake organized the diversion because he controlled transport. Edwin Marr, at the depot office, saw discrepancies. Clara Marr, keeping books for the kitchen, saw shortages from the receiving side. Both knew enough to stop it. Neither did. Marr's hands were tight on his hat. He said, "We were afraid." "Yes," Wolfe said. "Hunger is frightening enough. The people who profit from it are more so." He picked up the locket and opened it. "The new clasp," he said, "repaired by Emil Crane at Victor Talbot's request, proves recent handling. The delivery route proves access. The red warehouse dust proves Clara's connection to Drake's stored records. The missing ledger page proves the theft arrangement. All that remained was motive for the repeated return of the locket." He looked at Marr. "Mr. Marr, tell Inspector Kramer why you threw it into the river." For a moment I thought Marr would fail even now. Then something in him sagged, and when he spoke the carefulness had gone out of his voice. He sounded old and tired and accurate. "Not because it contained Laura's memory," he said. "Because Clara found it among Laura's things with the ration ticket still hidden inside. Told me it tied back to the old depot page she had already concealed, and begged me to get rid of it." Kramer stared. "When, the day after Laura's funeral, Clara came to me with the locket. She had found it among Laura's things and discovered that the ration ticket was still hidden inside the rim. She said that if anyone ever connected it to the old depot page, Simon Drake would not be the only one disgraced. She said the page had been hidden, but the locket was another token, and tokens survive where papers do not. She begged me to bury it, burn it, throw it away, anything. I chose the river." "Why not go to the police?" Kramer demanded. Marr gave him a look of naked misery. "Because we had been too frightened to expose the crime when it happened, because by then it was old. Laura was dead, and Clara thought scandal would ruin what remained of the family. Because I was a coward." Wolfe inclined his head. "At last, a statement of value," I said. "And Laura had found it before her death." "Yes," Marr said. "She had discovered more than I knew. Clara believed Laura meant to use it. Against Drake, perhaps against me, perhaps only to force the truth out. We quarreled about it. Then Laura died." Kramer growled. "You still think that fall was an accident?" Marr looked at the locket. "I know now what I was too cowardly to admit then. Laura did not simply fall. Fear had already entered the house, and Drake had put it there. That was enough for now. The law can prosecute only so many ghosts at once." Wolfe turned to Kramer. "Drake believed the depot page lost and the locket destroyed. Years later he learned the locket had once belonged to Laura Marr and might have resurfaced through Talbot. He had it repaired, or had it repaired through Talbot, then used delivery access to place it repeatedly in the bread box. He meant to force Edwin Marr into surrendering any surviving papers before someone else did." Clara recognized the ration ticket at once and understood the old theft was back in circulation as leverage. She sought the warehouse records, recovered or confirmed the missing page, and decided, too late, to stop being afraid, for that she was killed. Kramer's jaw worked. "He was already fitting charges into place," I said. "And Howard Cullum?" Wolfe's lips moved. "Cullum learned enough from Laura years ago, and from recent movements around Talbot to realize the matter had revived. He prepared a statement for me because he lacked either the courage or the trust to go first to the police. That deficiency cost him." Kramer grunted. "It'll do." That from Kramer was practically a sonnet. Marr sat very still. Then he said, "Will this be public?" Wolfe looked at him with no softness whatever. "Murder is public. Theft from the hungry ought to be. Shame delayed does not improve." Marr nodded. He had no answer to that, and there wasn't one. The room went quiet. Outside, the city kept moving, bread trucks backing to curbs, porters carrying crates, people buying loaves without the slightest idea how much history a bread box might hold if used properly by the vicious. Wolfe closed the locket and set it beside the ration ticket. Sentiment, he said, may hide in lockets. But blackmail prefers containers with hinges and kitchens with habits. The repeated delivery to the bread box was ingenious, because it used routine as disguise. Mr. Drake relied on usefulness. Usefulness is trusted. Bread is admitted. Therefore the past could enter the house every morning without knocking. He looked from the Locket to Ma, and then to Kramer. When bread is involved, he said, the past comes not to mourn but to eat. That was Wolfe at his best, or near enough, precise, contemptuous, and final. After Kramer took Ma downtown for a formal statement, and left with the ledger page, the twine, the ticket, and his usual reluctance to seem grateful. The office relaxed by a degree. Saul had gone. Fred had gone. The room was ours again. Fritz appeared in the doorway long enough to announce lunch in 15 minutes and to give the Locket a glance suggesting he preferred crimes that stayed out of kitchens. I stood by my desk and looked at Wolfe. Well, I said, you fed them. He took up his beer. Puis they fed themselves, on greed, fear, and delay, and bread. Yes. I moved to the window and looked down at West 35th Street. A bakery truck was unloading at the corner. The driver passed loaves down to a porter with the routine efficiency of a man who had never hidden anything more scandalous than stale rye. New York rolled on, full of appetites, large and small, honest and otherwise. Behind me Wolfe said, Archie. Yes, see that the bread box in this house is inspected. I turned. For blackmail. For bread, he said. One should not confuse categories. That was the close of it. The river had not kept its secret, because the Locket had never truly ceased to circulate among the living. Clara Ma had found courage too late. Edwin Ma had found honesty only under force. And Simon Drake had discovered that time is not the same thing as safety. In the old brownstone on West 35th Street, among orchids, good coffee, and Wolfe's mountainous certainty, the past had been opened like a hinged brass shell, and inside it had been exactly what Wolfe said it was. Not memory. Evidence.